Hello and welcome everyone. Take a seat when you're not just sitting. My name is Frederike Scheper and I'll be your host for this session by Ricardo Sueiras. And Ricardo is a principal developer advocate at AWS. He has like 30 years of experience working in technology, collaborating with developers on shaping the future of development. And that context, today Ricardo is speaking about 0 to shipped in 30 minutes with AI coding assistants. So starting with a blank IDE and one sheet, he was telling me, Ricardo will build a working app from scratch before this session ends, with his own favorite AI coding assistant to help him. So he'll show us how to create deployable code in just like 30 minutes. So give a great hand to Ricardo.
Thank you. Thank you for the intro. Yes, of course, I should add that this is live coding, so I do need the help of the demo goddess and gods because, yeah, we can see that. That's the slide. That's the one slide you're going to get. So let's minimize that, make sure it's okay. So we can see that I have nothing. And hopefully by the end of this, we'll have something. So I'm going to open up my IDE of choice, VS Code, make sure. So at the back, is that okay? Can you see it? Can you share? Yep. Okay. Right. Good. Okay. So what am I going to cover in this talk? So I've been using AI coding assistants in different shapes and forms for about 18 months now. And I've made a couple of observations in that time. First of all, they're getting better every week. Secondly, the more you use them, so I use them daily, the more you learn about how to use them effectively. When I talk to developers who are experimenting and exploring them, they give me different accounts. Some love it, some are really making doing good things with them. Others get frustrated and they say they've tried them but they didn't really work for them. So I'm kind of interested to hear, put your hands up if you have tried AI coding assistants at all. God, that's good. It's a good portion of you. Okay, now put your hand up if you tried them but you thought they were rubbish. Okay, there's a few. Okay, right, and I hear this a lot. Okay, so the goal of this talk is to share some of the things I found work for me. And we're going to do that by building an application from scratch and then kind of doing all the bits and pieces we would need to effectively shift left and push it onto the CI/CD system for them to deploy it. Now, what kind of application are we going to build? I can hear you all asking. Well, in the current climate, with the new president in one of the major countries, I felt the time was needed for a fact-checking application. So I'm going to build a fact-checking application. And I'm going to show you how I might build that using some of the techniques I've learned. And I will be using one AI coding assistant called Amazon Q, but what I'm going to share with you will work with others as well. I use regularly Zed. Anyone here using Zed? No? Try it out. It is awesome. I think it's the future of IDEs. So like many kind of these AI coding assistants, when you install it via a plugin, it provides you with a kind of UX, a user interface, which is a chat box. But I'm going to come to that in a bit. First of all, I'm going to sort of tell you how I structure these projects. Now, the output you get from AI coding assistants is only as good as two things. The prompt you create, but probably more important than the prompt is the context you provide. Now, what does context mean? Context is the files in your project. So if you're working on an existing code base, the stuff you've got there. But if you're working on a greenfield site, it is things like project specification files, your own sort of developer coding standards or likes, maybe your organization's coding standards or likes, and things like the data model. So I like to begin with the data model. So I've kind of already created this, but I could have used this tool to create a data model. But most organizations, they have a team that already does this, and maybe you go to your kind of liquid system and download the data model you want. But I'm just going to create a directory called data model, and I'm going to call this factchecker.yaml, and I've got a markdown document here of one I'd done earlier. Okay, so imagine that I'm working in this big organization, and they've got kind of a whole bunch of data models for different things, different kind of use cases. And in this instance, I'm going to take that. Now imagine I'm a new developer in an organization. You've got either code, you might have snippets of code, you might have projects, you might even have a data model, and you want to know a bit more about this. One of the things that these AI coding tools is really good at is helping you explain and understand stuff. So here I can directly, through the IDE, I can ask the AI coding assistant to explain this stuff, right? And obviously, this is quite a simple data model. Imagine you've got a really complicated one. It's now going to basically drill down and provide you much more information. So you as a developer now understand more about, okay, the data model of the thing that I'm going to build an application for. It works equally well, for example, if you're building an API and you've got a Swagger document, taking the Swagger document and then asking questions about that helps you understand the APIs you're working with. Okay, so we've got a data model, and data models are really good context, because when you ask then these AI coding tools to build stuff, they're going to look at that data model and respect, hopefully, what's in there. And we'll see that when we come to build code. So that's the first bit of context we're going to give it. But we're not done yet. Next bit is we're going to create a folder called spec. And within the spec, I'm going to create a markdown document called spec. It doesn't matter really what you call it. But what effectively I'm going to put in here, again, I'm copy and pasting because you don't really want to watch me type. Let's get rid of this for the moment, minimize this. So what is the spec? What am I doing here? So what I'm doing is I'm what's called scaffolding the project, and I'm defining here what I want the output of this of the AI coding assistant to respect, okay? And so this is where you're kind of like trying to narrow down the options, because LLMs are very good at taking a prompt and then giving what it wants. But as a developer working on a project, you don't really want it to give it what it wants. You want to shape, you want to control the output, and this is how you do it. You create scaffolding documents, and these can be very detailed. I'm deliberately making this one simple because it's a simple piece of code, but I'm defining two things. I'm defining, first of all, things like libraries or programming languages that I want it to use. Okay, so rather than it creating something in Java or Go, I want this in Python. I don't want fast API. I want Flask because it's easy to show, that kind of thing. Now, to come up with these documents, you start off either with your own knowledge, your own standards, your own organization standards, and you will craft these over time. You will shape them. You can actually even use the LLMs themselves to say, this is my scaffold. I'm creating this kind of project. How could I improve the scaffold? And it will give you, and you can then basically edit it and then come up over time with much more detailed scaffold documents. Another thing that I use scaffold documents is to try and make sure I can control and shape the output. So I specify a directory structure, which is typically what you would do the layout for a Flask application. So now we've got quite a good bit of context. We can now actually ask our LLM to actually do something. And now this particular kind of AI coding system, Amazon Q developer, has a bunch of agents. And what an agent will do is it will take a prompt. And this is the prompt. I'm going to put it in so I can then talk about it afterwards. Effectively, what it will do, what's going on here? Is it working? It's working. Agents will take a prompt and they will break it down into a series of tasks. They will attempt to sort of tackle each task in turn, building and writing code, testing code, making sure it works before proceeding to the next task. So what we'll see is it's actually starting to work. It's going to start generating code. I hope it's going to start generating code. That kind of worries me a little bit. I'm not sure what that's for, but let's give it a time. So yeah, what we'll see is it's going to start generating code. You see, this is why you don't work with AI tools, right? I'm sure this is going to work. Let me try. Should I kill this or not? The question is, I could try again. You know what? I don't like this. So I'm going to kill it. Sorry, sorry. This is not right. Let's try. That is okay. Now let's try that. Okay, now let's try. Okay, that's not a good start, but hopefully that's the only one. Right. So let's try again. Okay, so I generate code for that. Gathering context, generating code. Okay, right. So as I was saying, we've crafted this prompt, and it's going to take this prompt, break it down into a series of tasks, generate code, test it, and then build upon that. And what we'll see, hopefully, I'm going to leave it this time because it looks like it's done it okay, and the Wi-Fi is connected okay. We'll start seeing it giving us a real-time update of what it's doing. So it's going to tell us that it's going to review code and what files it's going to review. And I expect it to basically review the context files that I specified in the prompt. And then as it starts creating and writing files, it's going to tell us which files it writes. So, okay, now let's look at the prompt. Now, oh gosh, no. So I ran this twice this morning, right? And it worked fine. So, and the Wi-Fi is okay. Why is it not doing anything? That is bizarre. Maybe I should quit VS Code and try again. I'll tell you what, I'm going to do that. I'm going to quit VS Code and try again, because that does not look healthy. Okay. Just bootstrapping the plugin. So it's going to take about 7 minutes to do the thing. So I'm not going to leave you dangling for 7 minutes. I'm going to talk about what is good prompt. So let's try for the third time. Uploading code. It's uploading code. It's gathering context. It's generating it. Right. Okay. So I'm going to leave this now, and I'm not going to worry too much about if it's actually. What I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of do something sneaky. Right, so I've showed you one AI coding assistant, okay, which is the one that's been plugged in. I'm a command line person, right, and there is another tool, and I've actually already pre-added the data model and the specification file. So if I look at the data model, you can see that basically it's the same thing that I had there before. And this tool is called Q, and it's a command line tool. Okay, and so if you prefer command line, which is something I do, then this provides exactly the same capabilities as what you might have in VS Code. I actually use this when I'm in within Z. And I can actually, so I can take that prompt, and I can basically, using the editor, now type in that prompt, and it's going to start doing stuff. Now, the difference between doing it in the IDE, it has actually started deciding to work now. Obviously, I thought I'd give it competition and see and wake it up. So we've actually now got two running in parallel, which is exciting. We'll see which one finishes first. So the one in the command line actually can read files without asking permission, but if it wants to write files, it's going to ask you for permission, which is always a good thing to look out for any AI coding tools. And most of them now will ask you in their agentic flows for you to basically confirm that you're okay writing with them. So we can see here that now we've got the beginning of the process of writing code. So it's going to now give us an update, and it's going to keep us updated in real time as it reviews files, as it creates files, and as it actually changes and modifies them. Okay, so this is going to take 7 minutes. So what are we going to do for the next 7 minutes? What I thought I'd do is walk you through something that I get asked a lot when I'm doing these, right? Which is, how do you know how to create a good prompt when using AI coding assistants? Okay, and there's kind of what I've learned over the last kind of like year and a bit is there are kind of 4 key things to writing good prompts. So the first one is specificity and clarity. Okay, these AI coding tools are really good, but they are not, they can't read your mind. Very similar to, we've all known this as developers, right? You go into a meeting with customers and they just say, oh, we just want that widget, just build it, right? And they just think we know exactly, how to build this so it meets every bit of their needs, right? So as good developers, in those meetings, we drive those requirements discussions, non-functional, functional. And then at the end of the meeting, we've got a better idea of actually what they really want. And this is the same with prompts, right? You need to make sure you specify what you actually want. And they don't work with necessarily with big problems. What you have to do is take a large problem and break it down into smaller tasks. And then for each of those tasks, be very specific as to what you want. Now, what you can do is you can actually build a plan. So you can build, say, Markdown is the new kind of standard now for the way these tools work. You create a Markdown document. You might specify a problem at the top. You might break that down into 5 steps, 5 pieces. Each of those you then document how you would tackle and how you want to tackle each of those tasks. And that is a much better prompt. So when I look at the example prompt that I gave here for a simple fact-checking application, I broke down just the basics of the initial kind of core application. I didn't want any bells and whistles, because what I would do is I would build based on what it actually creates, the core. I might then have another prompt that says do things like maybe exporting data, or maybe adding an ability to create reporting, etc. Right? So, because this is a simple example, I just wanted to build the core. And so, so the things you want to avoid is being too ambiguous and being too broad. So the second kind of tip is kind of the more you provide information about what it is you're doing, the better the output, the relevancy to the output you get. So here really it's more around describing maybe the context of your project, functional, non-functional requirements, that kind of thing. But it's easy to try and provide too much information. These AI tools don't have infinite context, and if they do, or if you don't see it, you're probably paying for it somewhere. The third tip, which is probably the most important, and you're going to hear me say this word a lot, is context. We've already seen 2 examples of this, the data model and the scaffolding. But the reality is that if you're working on an existing code base, the repo you're in is context. It's all the files you currently have. So this is kind of probably the most important factor when LLMs decide what they are going to give you. They will decide based on the context you as a developer provide, plus the prompt, what it's going to give you. So remember, as developers, we are in control of the context. If we do nothing, it's just the tool is going to choose its own context, which is typically just maybe the open file you've got in your editor. But nearly all AI coding tools now allow you to specify directories, files, images. Some even do web addresses, right, as context. And what that will do is it will actually go to that directory, that web page, grab that stuff, convert it typically to a local Markdown document, and use that together with your prompt to decide what it's going to generate. Now, this is really important because LLMs have kind of cutoff in their training data, which means if you're working on a really brand new library, there's a good chance it's not in the LLM's training data, which means it's not going to be able to help you. And if it does, it's probably hallucinating. So what you can do is you can provide context of a directory, which might be the repo you've checked out. And I've done this last year with a new Redis, well, actually it's not Redis, Valkey. So Valkey is the open source fork of Redis. And they have a new client, Glide client, but it's kind of brand new. And so when I asked the LLM to create an example client library for me, to update my existing application, which was using the old way of connecting to Valkey using the Redis client, it didn't know how to do it. So I had to fork the project, provide context to the directory of the new library, and then it was able to build the code from that. So context is your friend. But again, too much is not always the best. The temptation as developers is to say, take it all, right? Use it all. The problem is that if you do that, you won't necessarily separate what you want it to do from everything else. And the final thing about providing or helps define a good prompt is providing examples of both inputs and outputs. And this is really important, especially for doing APIs, right? Specify what you want or expect as inputs to the API and then what you're going to return. And provide good examples. If you're wanting to ask it to write code, you can, for example, say for every function, I want a doc string, I want variables defined in this font, camel case or whatever your standard is. Maybe even provide a sample function saying I want them to kind of look like this. And then the LLM should respect that and then start creating code that way. And again, the thing you kind of want to avoid is the inputs and outputs do have to be specific and detailed enough so that it can respect them. Now, actually, I'm not sure if that's clear, actually. I'm sure it's a bit fuzzy. Let's see if I can I make that bigger? Nope, I cannot make that bigger. So some examples, okay? So as a prompt, one prompt might be, how do I deploy a container on AWS? That's a very poor prompt. It's going to give you very, I guess, non-deterministic output. It's going to give you very variable. Every time you run it, you're going to get a different answer. Whereas the second one, you're providing a lot more information. And that's going to give you a much more narrow, focused, more specific response. A good example of what a kind of a detailed context you might want to put together is something like this. Put business context. So this is the awareness piece, the technical requirements, which is your scaffolding, any specific request you want to do in this particular prompt, and then details of your inputs and outputs with examples. And you could you use that as a template for all the prompts you're doing. And what I have found is if you do this, you tend to get pretty consistently good output. And whilst the code isn't always the same, it typically achieves, everything you want. So there is uniformity in kind of the functions it creates, the data models, data classes it creates, the APIs it generates, it tends to kind of work really well. So let's go back to the IDE. Where are we? So you can see it's kind of still, it's actually finished. So first rule of using AI coding tools is do not accept the code it gives you. Okay, so I want another kind of straw poll here. You paid good money for these AI coding tools, right? So this one I'm using is free, but there's a $19 subscription, which if I was paying, it generates some code for me. Put your hand up if you think the code it generates is beautifully secure, non-bugged code. Wow. Two hands. So, I'm actually with you on this. If I'm paying for something, surely it's going to give me good code, right? But sadly, the tears will flow. These do not create good code, right? They have all the flaws of code we create, which means that you have to implement a trust but verify approach. Now, it's very hard because, here it's generated some code. How can I possibly, because it's not actually created the code in my repo yet. This is still somewhere in the AI coding tool. So you have to kind of develop a kind of a mental model for how to quickly review code. And so the approach I do is, did it follow what I want? Did it follow what I asked it to do in the prompt? Does the logic look sound? Is it following some good practices that I'm familiar with? And I kind of try and go through that process because it's kind of like light enough that I can do it quickly. And I will go through this based on my knowledge of the programming language and say, that looks okay, that looks okay, that looks all right. So I'm going to say, I'm going to give it feedback. That looks okay. And I'm going to accept the changes. So now I've got code in my repo that's been created by the AI tool. Now, interesting to see if this one is finished. Oh, no, it's not finished because it was asking me to do something. All right, I'll leave that running. Okay, so we now have code, but does it actually run? Which is the question. So let's actually open a terminal window. Create. And this is where I might need the collective knowledge and wisdom of everyone here to help me debug this application if it doesn't work. Now you might have noticed actually when I'm typing away, you can see this I'm using that Q in the command line. It actually is working on the command tools as well. So you'll see the box that pops up, but it's also doing autocomplete. So it knows what I want to do before I actually know it. So it's quite a nice little tool to help you type in less. Now it hasn't created a requirements file for me, so I'm going to have to know. That looks probably about right for this project. Now, sometimes when you run this, it will generate a requirements.txt file. I tend to delete it, right? And the reason for that is that quite often these LLMs create libraries based on what they want and what they know, but they're old versions of libraries. And so you get into a situation where you have this kind of echo chamber when you're using AI coding tools, in that they will like to use and stay with the things they really like. So imagine maybe as developers, we have our own versions of frameworks we like, right? And LM's the same. But with Flask, it always uses like a 2x version, not a 3x version. I don't like that. So now we could try running the application. And wow, it worked potentially first time. That's a first. I shouldn't sound so surprised. Let's see if it actually works. Look at that. It didn't work. But that's okay, because I've got a feeling that the reason why it didn't work is because the database hasn't been initialized. Oh no, it has been initialized. Okay, not a problem. So this is where I really like having the kind of CLI tool. So I could use the kind of the chat to introspect on the project. So actually we can do that, right? And I can show you the context. So if I use the @ sign, and again, all the different AI coding tools use different, I can specify either the entire code that's in this project, or I can specify a directory. I can say, when I open up the home page, it generates an error. Okay, so now I need to get the error. Oop. Come on. Actually, maybe easier to do it if I do it on that. Okay. And we'll see what it gives me, but I probably won't even follow this. I'll probably use the command line to fix it. Okay, so you can see what it's doing is this is now a different flow. We've gone from the agent way of doing it to the agentic, which is basically now kind of thinking out loud, and I'll walk me through what it's basically thinking. It's found the issue because you initialize Flask login with that, but haven't defined the loader function, which is actually this is a common, what you find again when you're using these tools with your favorite libraries, they often make repeatable mistakes. So the user login for Flask is one common one. Database not initializing is another. Import sort of circular imports is another one. So we can see basically the code it's changed, how it's changed that. Now, I want to talk about vibe coding very briefly, okay, versus chop. So vibe coding, everyone's probably heard of vibe coding, right? So vibe coding is not what I've showed you today. Vibe coding is literally you have no context, no scaffolding, no structure. You give it a prompt, it just does stuff from you. Chop, which is chat-orientated programming, is where you define context, you define constraints, you narrow down what you want it to create. So this is more like chop programming rather than vibe programming, just in case you haven't heard of the chop one. So if we try running it again. See if that actually works this time. And now we can log in, but we need to register first. Rick. And we now have our fact checker. Let's add a category. Let's create a new fact. DevDays is awesome. Create fact. Let's view details. Vote as fact, because I think we can all agree. Round of applause for Dev Day. I think I've got to say, I go to a lot of conferences, right? But I can't think of many conferences where you have comfortable seats, amazing big screens. So thumbs up from me. So you can see this basic application works, right? So it looks good, right? And in, I don't know how long we've taken so far, but in not that much time, you've got some working code. But we're not done yet, okay? Because, as I mentioned before, the code that these things create isn't secure. So whenever you're using these tools, you need to make sure that you use your own security tools to scan that. So this AI tool has got such a tool called Review. But before I do that, before we use that, what I need to do is first of all touch.git ignore, git init, and what I need to do is I need to add git ignore, so that to ignore for the review file, to ignore things like the virtual Python directory. Otherwise, I'm going to get millions of false positives. So add Python stuff to this ignore file. So what I'm using there is I'm using the in context inline editing capability of this AI coding assistant. So what you'll find is that the tools, the AI tools, they work in files you're editing within the chat interface or within Jenkins. So basically, they're kind of embedded in across all the way that the ID works. So now I can just do /review, and I can say review the workspace. And what it's now going to do is it's going to take the stuff except what I've defined in the git ignore, and it's going to run a bunch of 5 security stroke quality tests. So it's the SAST, so I can't remember what that stands for, but it's looking for things like, memory leaks, SQL injections, cross-site scripting. It's going to look for secrets vulnerability. Have you defined or hard-coded secrets? It's going to look for best practices. Are you implementing coding best practices? And it's also going to look for supply chain issues. So are you using known versions of vulnerable libraries? Okay. Now, obviously, if you're in your own organization, you would use your own tool to do this. But the important thing is that what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are, before we commit this code and shift left, we want to make sure that we've reduced as many issues as possible. Now we can see that it's come up with a number of issues, okay, which makes me sad, but then I'm happy because I've now got them listed. So I'll deal with the critical one, okay? If I click on it, it takes me to the code. And for any of the issues I've got, I can zoom into it. Actually, let's change that. I can zoom into the issue. And what it's going to do, it's going to generate a fix automatically for me. And it's going to work away, create some code. And whilst it's doing that, I could ask it to explain what this CW is if I want more issues. Now, I knew this was going to happen because it's not the smartest sort of tool. So it's basically saying that in order to get rid of this problem, we need to get rid of app.run. But if we get rid of app.run, then the application won't run. So I'm actually going to not accept this, right? It's not actually, but this actually is what it wants to do. So let's see if it actually, because I'm hoping, yeah. See what it's not what it's not doing. This seems to be a bug, I think, with this version. This bit here is right, but it's not. If I open the diff, what it's doing is actually delete. Actually, it's actually deleting the whole thing. Okay, so I'll accept the fix. Oh no, it didn't actually fix that. That's not right. Okay, so let's try if I can paste it. Okay, that's better. Now, so you do have to be wary of the kind of the guidance that it gives. Same with all LLM tools, right? But you can see now that the issue's gone here, and I can go. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to give you kind of like a sense of, you would use a tool, whichever tool you have, to work through the coding issues like you normally would. Okay, right. So how much time I've got? I've got not much time left. So now we're not completely done yet. Right, so let's have a look. Let's minimize what I did before here. So when I ran this before, I generated a new prompt actually where I should show you the prompt. No, it's not that one. It's here. Okay, right. Okay, so the next step, okay, would, now that I've got some working code, the working code is fine for dev, but it's not suitable for shipping, right? If I run a containerized system, I want to basically do stuff like build, package it up to run a different runtime like Unicorn, make sure it builds a Docker file, expose the database connection, because at the moment it's using SQLite locally. So I would use a prompt like this. Now this takes a bit longer, so I ran it earlier on today, and I run it through the command line, and we can see here basically it's got to a situation where if I actually go to the project, where is the code? Let's open a new window. DevDay. Fact checker working. Okay. And so this is kind of like the version I did before, but this has actually got the shipping code, right? So it created a Docker file for me, and this is all created by the CLI AI coding assistant. It's created a script so I can run it locally. It's run. It's created a prod one, and I can actually run this. So let's do run Unicorn. It should hopefully work. Oh. Why is it not working? Can't connect. That's interesting. Oh, I know why. It's because I've already got it running. I ran it before, so if I run the browser on 127 on 8000, it should be up and running. Yeah. So let's log in. And I did it a slightly different one, basically. So this is the same. So this is again different code base because I run it earlier. But now this is running on a container via Unicorn. Running on, I've got a local Postgres container running here, and I can package that up now. I could deploy it onto my favorite container service and just make sure it's got connectivity to the database, and I'm good to go. So that's pretty much it. I think I've got 5 minutes left. Is there anything else I need to cover before? No, I think that's pretty much it. Actually, let me share. Actually, there's one more thing I want to do. So, nope, that's not the one. Okay, so I do have some stuff to share with you. Okay, right. So I do have more than one slide, actually. So the stuff I've showed you, everything from the point of view of best practices, context files, scaffolding, I put together in 2 workshops. Okay, they're on GitHub. You can either use the Amazon Q tool to use this completely free, using something called a build ID, or you can use your own. I've tried it with Cursor. I've tried it with Klein. It works with both of them. So you can try those. I've also got basically a summary of the good prompt design here, which I talked about, which you can get access if you access that QR link, it's going to give you a link to those resources. So I think a short survey of 5 questions where I ask you for some feedback, and then you'll get those resources. So I think with that, thank you very much for your time. I hope this talk has been informative. I hope that you've learned something about how you can use AI coding tools to do whatever development kind you do, that you taken a better understanding of how context matters and how you can use it to shape the output you've got. And with that, I've got time for hopefully some questions.
Well, thank you. So, that was really helpful. Any questions from the audience? We've got like 5 minutes for questions. Okay. There's this one on the screen.
So, is it necessary to describe new features of the project in Markdown to give even more context? So, when you say new features, I'm assuming you've got an existing code base and you want to add new features. Is that right? Whoever wrote that? Yes? I can't hear. Yeah? Okay. So, the strategy for when you're working with existing code base is to, what I found has worked, is to try and define within that context the key things it needs to know about the code base. So which directories contain, for example, the right libraries or imports you want it to use. So you have to kind of like guide it to look in certain spaces. So that's what I found worked. If you just don't do that, okay, it does normally do a good job at working it out, but it's variable. So the more you can help it from the point of view, understand what the integration points with that existing code base are, the better you are going to have. So yeah, you'd put that into the Markdown document.
So what will happen to junior developers if senior developers with AI agents can do more faster and for an additional amount of money, let's say $50 per month?
So I can't see the future, okay. But what I can see is junior developers who are using these tools, and I think, well, I mean, it's not only a sample, right? But I see junior developers enthusiastically using these tools, maybe more aggressively than maybe senior devs do. So that, first of all, gives them an advantage. They're more familiar with, and they're getting to learn how to use these tools effectively. Now, junior devs are also using it to help them get past problems that ordinarily they would work through with a senior dev, right? But now they actually use the tools to ask questions, to troubleshoot. And they're pretty good at doing that. Okay. In fact, actually for learning, imagine you've got like a lab you're doing and you get stuck. Normally you have to go to the teacher and say, look, I'm stuck. I don't know how to do this. Maybe the crib sheets you've got don't quite work and provide you with the enough information to solve it. Well, LLMs now can help you as a student get past those. You can actually accelerate your learning through using those. And that's what I find a lot of junior devs are now beginning to do. And so their learning is being accelerated because they no longer need those senior devs as much, other than for contextual awareness. Why did we build this way? Well, grey beards come out. Oh, we did it this way because of that, right? And that can be easily documented, right, in a context file. So I don't know what the future is, but I do believe that junior devs have some advantages here. It's not all doom and gloom for junior devs.
So how would it, I assume that relates to agents, deal with the requirement changes and how flexible or dynamic the code currently is?
Yeah. So that's interesting. So good example, which I'm going to be doing in November at the DevDays Europe. Imagine you've got that code base and suddenly the data model changes, right? Common requirement. Okay. So it's very simple. You change the data model. You can ask the agents then change and refactor the code, and it does it really, really well. And vice versa, you can actually ask it to add new features in the application and update the data model. So I found it works reasonably well as long as the requirement and change is small enough to be focused. I have done things like I've taken old 6-year PHP project that had been abandoned, a Reddit clone, and I asked, QCLI in this instance to refactor it to Python. 45 minutes later, I had a fully functioning application that was migrated from MySQL to Postgres. So it can do really kind of like quite wider things as well. So I find it normally works pretty well.
Okay, well, that's about it for the time that we currently have. So
that one is Sonnet 3.7 is what it uses.
Another great hand for Ricardo.
Thank you.